Thank you to our colleagues in DIT Yorkshire and Humber for hosting this. When I was first invited, I thought we were all going up to Yorkshire for the day, but we're doing a webinar, which is the next best thing. So I will attempt to give you a brief overview of some of the main opportunity sectors in Saudi, and then my colleague Freddie Blackman will drill down in a bit more detail on some of the doing business issues. So just to start, I'd like to talk about some of the key opportunities in the Saudi Vision 2030 context. I think most of you will have heard of this very ambitious economic and social reform program that's been launched in Saudi. And it is a race against time to diversify what is still a very oil-dependent economy, but progress is now being made on growing new sectors, which I will come on to in a minute. There are some very ambitious targets, and one of the main challenges is the human capacity needed to implement all these reforms, hence really great opportunities for education and training, which my colleague Munir, I'm sure, will cover later. There is also a very ambitious Saudiization policy to upgrade skills and increase private sector employment. And if you're doing business in Saudi, and particularly opening an office or investing, you will be required to employ a minimum amount of Saudi staff, and there are different targets for each sector. There is an enormous demand for expertise across the board, and recognition, I think, of what the UK can offer, particularly in professional services, training, and healthcare, and some of the service sectors. And there is a big need to grow the private sector participation, and they need to pull in a lot more foreign direct investment to finance the ambitious reforms, because the days when public money was available to finance big infrastructure projects have passed, and now looking at a different way of doing things. Very briefly, economic update. At one time, Saudi was growing at 6, 7, 8% a year. Since the oil price drop, we're now looking at a roughly 2% plus for 2018, slightly more in 2019. And there was a dip in the economy in 2017 following the oil price drop. So as I said, the real challenge now is to grow the non-oil sector. Just a little bit about UK-Saudi relations, because you do need to understand the context. We are very traditional, historic partners. I mean, there are very strong people-to-people links. There are strong royal family links. And at governmental level, we have said that the UK wants to be a strategic partner to Saudi Arabia in implementing Vision 2030. And during the Crown Prince's visit here last March, a strategic partnership council was established. Some very ambitious targets agreed to grow trade and investment. And we are in particular targeting UK participation in some of the big what they call giga projects financed by the Public Investment Fund. I'm sure some of you have heard of NEOM, which is a new smart city, or I mean practically the size of Belgium in the north of the country. There's a very ambitious Red Sea tourism project, and outside Riyadh, a new entertainment city. We have Saudi-British MOUs agreed in a whole load of sectors: education, clean energy, cybersecurity, creative industries, to mention some. And there are a number of co-chaired private sector groups set up to actually promote the cooperation in different sectors, including privatisation, where we're expecting a delegation from the Saudi Centre for Privatisation coming to London next week. So just going on to some of the growth sectors, infrastructure, although as I said earlier, these projects will have to be financed now more on a PPP type basis, but good evidence of UK involvement in engineering and design with these big projects. Education and training, healthcare, increasingly now tourism and entertainment. This is a new sector, and there's a very big UK entertainment sector mission going to Saudi in March. We'll be hosting a debrief with them shortly afterwards. ICT and smart cities, we've also taken a delegation on that front. It's a very young population, and that's a growth sector. Professional services I mentioned earlier, and clean energy, where we're also taking a renewable energy mission next month. One thing that should be on there probably is transport as well. There is an ambitious program to privatise airports and develop metro schemes. There's a very big metro scheme in Riyadh being built at the moment. Moving on, healthcare. I know there are a number of companies joining the call from the healthcare sector. That is a good area in Saudi. They are moving now much more to expanding private sector provision. Previous restrictions on opening private clinics have been removed, and they are very keen to attract healthcare providers, hospital management companies, primary care and radiology, and right across the board in life sciences, and good opportunities for partnerships in that sector. Infrastructure, an ambitious industrial development logistics program was launched a couple of weeks ago. It covers manufacturing, mining, energy and logistics. These are all projects that are ready to go, but they do need private sector participation and investment to kick off. So again, that is a challenge, but ambitious targets, as I said earlier. Moving on to the tech sector, it's a very young and tech-savvy population in Saudi, and you can see a big expansion in the tech sector. They've launched a fintech initiative recently, e-government initiatives gaining force, e-commerce from a very low base, and all sorts of smart city applications. That's a very good area for involvement, and we've just put forward a plan to establish a Saudi-UK tech hub, where we hope to do a proof of concept study very soon to join up innovation centres in both countries. That's a picture of our recent tech delegation. Had a great visit in November, and you can see we were at the Ministry of ICT in Riyadh with the Deputy Minister on that occasion. And you'll see when you visit, you will get a very warm welcome, and it's very easy to access both governmental and private sector contacts. Moving on, renewable energy, they have very ambitious plans, and some of these have only just been announced. 59 gigawatts from solar and wind by 2030, and a number of new projects have just been launched. There's also good opportunities for off-grid, small-scale solar. We'll be taking a delegation from 18 to 20 March. We already have 20 companies signed up for that. And then how we can help you. Well, the Business Council is a joint business council, so we have a Saudi membership and a British membership, and that's the great advantage, is that we can connect you at both ends. We are part of British Chambers of Commerce network, and we have an office within the Council of Saudi Chambers in Riyadh. What we do is facilitate business and also expertise exchange. We try and help the Saudis in their reform ambitions, give them access to UK expertise, and we do that through regular sector-based events, largely in Saudi during the winter months, and for obvious reasons in London during the summer when a lot of our Saudi friends and business contacts are here. If we can't help, we will always try and introduce you to someone who can. And of course, AEI, who Freddie is speaking next, is one of our partners, and he'll explain more about the services they can offer. We also have a dialogue with the Saudi government and investment authority on barriers to trade and investment, and we have monthly meetings where we bring specific issues to the table and get them addressed. And these have concerned tax issues, late payments, business to government disputes. So there is a very keenness in the Saudi government now to improve the business environment, and they are reacting positively to specific issues we raise. Just to close off, this is not just a market to sell to anymore. This is very much more sophisticated. They're looking for expertise, local content, local employment. Provided you establish a partnership and a really good relationship, this is a long-term market where you can do well. But I do stress the long-term nature and the need to establish a local presence, and I'm sure that will be mentioned later. And these are some of the events we've got coming up. I mentioned most of them earlier. Do get in touch, have a look at our website if you'd like further details. And lastly, our contact details, which again are available on the website. But I look forward to responding to any questions later, and hand over to my colleague Freddie now. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Chris. I'm now going to hand you over to Freddie at AEI Saudi.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much, Chris, for that introduction, and also, of course, to the DIT team. It's good to be here. I'll keep this as brief as I possibly can to allow some time at the end for some questions, because I'm sure there will be questions. So, as a very, very brief introduction, as has been said, my name is Freddie Blackman. I'm a consultant with AEI. We are the DIT's delivery partner on the ground in Saudi Arabia, so we're able to provide consultancy, support services, life support services, all that sort of thing to British or to UK companies looking to export to Saudi Arabia or to do business in the kingdom. We don't exclusively work with UK companies. We do have a number of partnerships with the likes of the state of Virginia, the Australian government, New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, but of course a very strong relationship with SBJBC. So it's lovely to be here on the webinar with Chris today. Now, of course, there are a number of sort of larger clients here that people will recognise, but it is absolutely worth stressing that Saudi Arabia is still very much a market for SMEs. In fact, the vast majority of the companies that we have helped over the last 5 or 6 years have been SMEs, so it isn't inaccessible. There are the challenges, and I will get on to those in a little bit. A very brief potted history of Saudi. I mean, Chris has already gone into a bit of this. It is, of course, worth stressing that the relationship between the UK and Saudi Arabia has always been a very strong one. Right back to 1932 when the kingdom was founded. Originally a very poor country, but of course that all changed fairly quickly when they discovered oil. So it is just worth bearing that in mind, that it is a country that is new. It is only about 80 years old, so relatively new by Western standards or by other country standards. And of course that plays into the pace of change that we're seeing today. It is absolutely critical to mention the scale of the Saudi market. It is easy to forget or to not realise quite how large it is in comparison, particularly to its GCC neighbours. The likes of Qatar, Oman, the UAE, they all have a substantial amount of opportunity, and they are really markets worth considering. However, the scale of the Saudi market, both in terms of its geography, it's about the size of Western Europe, but also its population, which dwarfs all of its neighbours, is really something that cannot be ignored. So Saudi Arabia really should be a part of any serious exporter's Middle East strategy. There are, of course, preconceptions and misconceptions that people have about Saudi. So to address a few, well, it is a very, very young country, and that has been alluded to and confirmed by Chris speaking earlier. The population is about 70% under the age of 30 years old, about 60% under the age of 25. Now, of course, that does create a number of opportunities, but of course challenges too. Women are increasingly playing a much larger role in the workforce. There is increasing pressure for jobs. And indeed, those jobs you'll see right from the bottom end, where you'll see more and more Saudi women working in supermarkets as cashiers, all the way up to the CEO of one of the Saudi banks and the head of the Saudi Stock Exchange are Saudi women. They are a very interconnected population, a number of mobile phones per head, and probably the highest density users of Twitter, Facebook, and other social media sites around the world. And there are a number of Saudis studying in the UK every year, so of course that does give them an appreciation for the premium and the quality attached to British brands, products and services. So of course that does that is very, very helpful for UK companies looking to export. This is a question that is asked fairly often. Is Vision 2030 real? Well, yes, I think in a nutshell, I mean, the easiest way to answer it is absolutely yes. Vision 2030, and I won't go into too much detail on this because it has already been mentioned, but it is primarily about two things. It is about diversification of the economy away from oil, and it is about the creation of jobs for Saudi nationals. So there is a huge amount of economic change going on, much of it through the Public Investment Fund, but also a huge amount of cultural change. Over the last couple of years, we've seen events happening in Saudi Arabia that just couldn't have been imagined even 5 years ago. The first Riyadh Half Marathon in 2018, Comic-Con in Jeddah, men and women mixing freely without the oversight of the religious police, Saudi National Day celebrations, Western music concerts, and of course, the big news of 2018 was women finally being allowed to drive again. So things really are changing very, very quickly in Saudi. I think that is fair to say. And in terms of the economic impact, the government is looking for new revenue sources. So we've seen the introduction of VAT at 5% in 2018. We've seen the introduction of a number of different taxes, of expat taxes, dependent taxes, and sin taxes on sugary drinks, cigarettes, fast food, all with a view to improving the health and well-being of the Saudi population, and also, of course, generating revenue from other sources beyond oil. The Public Investment Fund, to talk about this very, very briefly, well, this is seen as the principal vehicle for the delivery of Vision 2030. The idea being that these PIF entities will be developed, will be stuffed with capacity, with contracts, with knowledge transfer, to the point where they can stand on their own 2 feet as at least semi-private entities generating revenue for the Saudi government, but of course helping in their diversification efforts. This sort of reiterates what Chris has said, so I won't dwell on this too much, but hopefully this slide does a fairly good job of really summing up quite how much opportunity there is in the Saudi market currently, whether that is in infrastructure or tourism and entertainment with the new tourist resorts, with the mega projects, or in renewables, nuclear, training and education, where we've seen significant increases in the total budget, or defence and security. Pretty much wherever you look, there is money being spent. So this is really, I think, what everybody is here to hear me talk about, is how to do business in Saudi and things to bear in mind, things to do, things not to do. Now, there's no secret to success in Saudi Arabia, but if you bear in mind a few things, then you will be much more likely to succeed. It is absolutely vital that you have a robust plan for entering the kingdom. That plan must include timescales, budgets, costings, the lot. You really must have a robust plan, because it is a market that can be a little bit complex. It can take time. So it is vital that you are patient. It could take you 12 or 18 months to win your first contract, but that is just the way things are in Saudi Arabia. Of course, there are stories of businesses winning contracts very, very quickly, and that could well happen, but you do need to be patient. It is a market with a huge amount of opportunity, but things can take time. Now, when I talk about presence, I don't mean necessarily that you need to have a permanent entity established in Saudi, but you certainly do need to be coming back and forth to develop those relationships with your potential customers, with your partners, your distributors, whoever it is. They want to see your face, they want to get to know you. You cannot do it from afar, you cannot do it all over email or over the telephone. If you need a partner, you may well not need a partner or a distributor, but if you do, then it is, of course, very, very important that you do your due diligence. It is all too easy to get swept up by someone purporting to be a Saudi prince, and of course there are a lot of them. So do your due diligence into whoever it is that you are looking to work with. Make sure that you have a robust contract. Make sure that the roles and responsibilities and expectations of both parties are very, very clearly defined. And of course, payment. Well, this is a question that is often asked of us. How do I get paid? And it is fair to say that Saudi Arabia has a reputation for payment issues, but there are a number of things that you can do to mitigate that payment risk. Things like letters of credit may well be possible, but otherwise, certainly looking for as much payment upfront as possible is really the best way that you can ensure that you are getting paid. Things like payment milestone plans built into that contract will, of course, help, and mobilization payments and a number of other things can help you. But absolutely, I think it is worth stressing that if you follow the first 4 Ps, if you're planning properly and you're getting to know the partner or the person that you're working with well, then you are far less likely to experience payment issues. A very brief bit on business culture. I think in general that the best thing to say is if you are polite and courteous by Western standards, you will be absolutely fine. Accept invitations. You will, of course, sit around drinking tea and coffee and getting to know people. It is about a more personal relationship, not jumping straight to the solution, but providing examples and discussing things. For those female clients or female travelers who are looking to go to Saudi but are perhaps a little bit worried, I think it is really, really important to stress that you shouldn't be worried at all, that things really are changing very, very quickly. It is broadly a very, very positive thing to see women traveling to Saudi Arabia on business, and you will see more and more women, both Saudi and expat, in the workforce, in the workplace, if you do travel out to the kingdom. As I said before, don't rely on emails, on phone calls, at least not until you've really got to know someone well. They have a habit of not responding particularly quickly to emails and phone calls, so it is really important to develop that face-to-face relationship, get their mobile number, and then talk to them over WhatsApp. It's how pretty much everything is done in Saudi Arabia. And a few common pitfalls just to highlight very, very briefly. We do very often get asked by clients of ours whether they can help us or give us support in setting up an entity in the kingdom. And I think it's really important to stress that you don't necessarily need a local commercial registration to begin with. In fact, it's very, very unlikely that that would be a good first step. There are a number of triggers that might lead you to needing to get your local commercial registration. Triggers such as your client requiring that they pay into a Saudi bank account. So if you're working with a particular ministry or government department and they won't pay into a foreign bank account, in that case, you might need to look at going down that route. Or if you need to issue iqamas, residency visas, or if there are specific licensing requirements. As I said before, I met a prince. Well, okay, there are about 15,000 of them. Many of them are very astute businessmen and very, very worth working with. But just because someone is a prince does not mean that they are capable of giving you everything that you want. And they may do a very good job of selling themselves to you. But do proceed with caution. As I said before, do your due diligence. Make sure that you know who it is that you are working with and you know that they have your best interests at heart as well as their own. Do not give exclusivity unless you absolutely need to. If you go back and have a look at the map that I showed at the beginning, you'll remember that Saudi is an absolutely huge market. So giving exclusivity to one distributor or partner is unlikely to yield the best results. It is unlikely that one partner will be able to cover the Saudi market properly. And do please get local advice, both local legal advice, but general business and commercial advice from the likes of AEI or of course from the DIT team, both in the UK but also within the embassy in Riyadh and the trade offices in Jeddah and Al Khobar. It is very, very important that you get that local advice to make sure that you are doing the right thing. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time. My email's at the bottom there. I think we'll have some time at the end of the webinar for some questions. But yeah, until that point, thanks a lot.
Great, thank you, Freddie. As you said, we are going to be taking some questions at the end of the webinar. So if you would like to type them in the Q&A panel, we'll get to them at the end. I'm now going to pass you over to Munir, who's from M2R Education.
Hi, greetings from West Yorkshire. Looking out the window, it's nice and sunny, so it'll do for me. Just to give you Sorry, apologies everybody, slight technical hitch, but we're back. So, just want to give you an overview of who we are, what we do, and then talk to you about, from a small business perspective, what it's like to do business in Saudi. So, we're based in West Yorkshire. We're an education recruitment company. We supply teachers, trainers to international schools, further and higher education colleges, and private language centres across the globe. And our core markets, Middle East, North Africa, Asia Pacific, but my actual specialism is Saudi Arabia, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. Like most UK businesses, we didn't wake up one day and decide that we were going to go and work in Saudi, so I just want to give you a bit of an overview to our journey. So for the first 6 or 7 years, we've just worked purely in the UK. Our markets in those days were media. Back in 2007, we got a contract in New York. Like most UK businesses, working overseas wasn't something that we'd thought of. The organisation in New York found us through an internet search, and despite our intrepidation and consternation, it turned out to be a legitimate lead. We completed the project, and then that opened the door to looking further afield. This was our first foray into the Middle East, which ended up being in Dubai, again working in media. At this point, we discovered the services of what then was UKTI, now DIT, and we started going on their trade missions, which I'll talk about later on. First one was Bahrain, then we went into Oman, Qatar, and in 2009, we entered Saudi for the first time. Mainly due to the success of working in Saudi Arabia and the education contracts that were coming out of there, I decided that in 2013 to do a full rebrand, focusing purely on education and predominantly within Saudi. Now, as has always been touched on by Chris and also Freddie, Business culture in Saudi is rather different to the business culture in the UK. When I first started going into Saudi Arabia, no one gave me this advice. I had to learn the hard way. I'm from a background where you close the sale. In Saudi Arabia, that doesn't work. You have to build the relationship first. As already been said, you've got to keep going back. There's a huge trust element here. The phrase, seeing the whites of your eyes really does, it speaks volumes to Saudi. You can't just turn up, try and close, and come home like you would do in the UK. Trust me, I tried, and it didn't work. You have to be in there for the long haul, especially, if you're looking to build those relationships. Now, over the years smallest laptop keys in the world, I do apologise. So based on all our work that we've done in Saudi, as you can see, this is just a snapshot of what we have achieved. We've worked on some huge, fantastic projects. These are not projects that we got just from day one when we arrived. These have taken years and years of development. We didn't get our first project, as Freddie alluded to before. You can't just rock up and walk away with a contract. I know companies that do, but it's a rarity. For us, our first contract took about 6 to 8 months, to the point where I genuinely thought that Saudi was a waste of time for us. I couldn't have been more wrong. So you've got to persevere. We've worked on brand new projects in the culinary sector. We've worked on innovative projects in aviation. We work with 75% of all the international trade partners who work with the Colleges of Excellence, whose aim is to develop the young Saudi population and get them into work. We've worked with a number of the universities there. And as you can see, because of all this work that we've done, we have received substantial amounts of accolades. The reason why I put this on, especially in Saudi, they like working with organisations that can demonstrate success, that can demonstrate commitment to the market, and especially here, they do like to hear about what you have achieved. So when you are there, really do feel free to blow your own trumpet. It does make a difference. So before I finish, I'm just going to give you my top tips about working in Saudi. Again, most of these have been covered, but I don't think it's going to do any harm to go through them again. As Freddie said, you've got to research, you've got to plan, you've got to decide whereabouts in Saudi you first want to go. It is a massive country. You can't just do it in a week. So decide, are you going to go to Riyadh? Are you going to go to the Eastern Province? Are you going to go to the Western Province? How long are you going to stay there? Who are you going to see? Our route to market has always been going in via DIT trade missions. As far as I'm concerned, they are excellent. And I'm not just saying that because I'm in DIT's offices. They are excellent. They're a tremendous way of meeting contacts in the region that you probably wouldn't get to see otherwise. Other one, rather an obvious point, but again, no one told me that wearing the suit that you wear in December in Leeds isn't the suit that you wear in May when you go to Saudi. Again, you're probably going to look at these and think this is all really obvious. It is really obvious, but only somebody tells you. Again, building that relationship, building the bond, building the relationship, it's all about trust. You've got to have patience as well. You won't get anywhere by getting frustrated. Bear in mind that meetings probably don't happen at the time that they're arranged. They could go on longer than you imagine. They might be really short. You've just got to go with the flow. Again, both Freddie and Chris talked about going back time and time again. You've got to show commitment. This is not just indicative of Saudi, it's the entire region. If you're the sort of organisation or sort of person who you want to go there once and not go back, my advice is don't even bother. Just go somewhere else because it's not going to work. Again, WhatsApp. As a UK business, from our perspective, we find it odd communicating over an SMS service, but it's how business is done in Saudi Arabia. You just got to go with it. When I'm there, I always get a local number. Again, it's just easier to make those impromptu meetings. Yes, of course, there's a cost element in here. You know, it's a lot cheaper. But again, it shows your Saudi contacts or your Saudi colleagues that you are committed because you've thought about this. DIT's resources, use DIT. They are excellent. Also, we've worked with AEI as well before. You know, I'm an advocate of all of this. And finally, I have put here, you know, it's not scary. I tend to find, especially in our industry, that the only people who don't like Saudi Arabia are the people who have never been. Yes, it's hot. Yes, the driving is terrifying. Yes, you'll see things and you'll probably wonder where on earth you are, but it's worth it. You've got to persevere. I've got huge amounts of friends in Saudi now. I've got tremendous respect for the country. You know, I like the way the country is going. We want to be part of it. So from our perspective, you know, we will persevere and I will continue to go back. So that's it from me. Here are my contact details. If you want to know anything else with regards to our work, what we've done, if we can help, anything about going on trade missions, please get in touch afterwards. And thank you very much for your time.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Renee. I'm now going to pass you over to Simon, who's from the Department of International Trade.
Thanks so much, Corinne. So when you go on force, obviously most of the important things have already been discussed, but what I'm going to cover in the next few minutes is a bit of a confirmation about why Saudi Arabia our support as an organisation on the ground in Saudi, and then a little bit building on what Munir's been talking about your first visit, if you haven't been before, the preconceived ideas, but what the reality is. So a nice picture of Riyadh gives you an idea of what it's like. Very big cities in Saudi now, and as we said this morning, massive country the size of Saudi, the size of the whole of Western Europe. Have a look at what the IMF's saying. Chris was talking about percentage GDP growth. Obviously, the growth rate in Europe is not exactly good at the moment. In countries like Saudi Arabia, it's very dependent on the oil price, but compared with 2017, 2018, the predictions by the IMF, we can see getting up above 2%. Looking at World Bank ease of doing business, comparing Saudi with other countries around the world, because why would we go to Saudi if there are better options? Whole host of different countries there. You can take a guess as where you'd rank them on the World Bank ease of doing business index. Or we can see down there ups and downs of different countries, but looking to the bottom to Saudi and its neighbours, obviously UAE, Dubai, Abu Dhabi doing really well. But Saudi, yeah, not the easiest country in the world to do business, but you know, still in the top half, well in the top half of countries from around the world. The latest figures came out this month from Transparency Corruption Perception Index. So you can see again, the lighter colours show the least corrupt countries, the darker colours the most corrupt, and we can see that, you know, generally in the Gulf, the Middle East, not doing too badly. Yeah, you see Saudi at number 58. So actually, in terms of people worry about, is it very corrupt? Well, actually, getting quite a good score from Transparency. So who are we? Most people, hopefully because you're on the webinar this morning, know who we are. We used to be, as Munir said, UK Trade and Investment. We're now a government department, the Department for International Trade, and we've got global reach. We're in 110 countries, 175 locations around the world, and I've put on the slide there, we can do an OMIS report for you. We can do an Overseas Market Introduction Service report on all these countries, but we're talking about Saudi today. Yeah, we've got good coverage in Saudi because we're based in 3 cities. The main embassy is in Riyadh, but we've also got Consulate General in Jeddah, and in the Eastern Province, we're in Al-Kabar. Interesting to note the hours of business, which I'll come back to, but the embassy works Sunday to Thursday, so we don't work Fridays, we don't work Saturdays. You can see we start early, we finish early, which again, we'll talk about that with companies you may be meeting out there. And just a map of Saudi showing on the left-hand side on the Red Sea, you've got Jeddah in the middle of the country, Riyadh, and on the Persian Gulf, you've got Dammam and Al-Kabar. A bit about the GRACE portal. We load everything, all the export advice, assistance, support on grace.gov.uk. And apart from the general export advice on there, you can get a link to country guides. And you can see we do, in fact, have a country guide on Saudi Arabia, which would be useful to download before you visit. So, sort of finishing off really, your first visit, picking up on some of the points that have been made by Chris, Freddie and Munir already. We talked quite a lot this morning. We heard about preconceptions, misconceptions. I think certainly people are probably a little bit worried before they go because they've heard all sorts of stories. Preparation before you go, yeah, do ensure you get all the paperwork in place in order to obtain a visa. I personally always use a visa agency, people like Gulf Visas, but there's plenty to choose from. And I did check with Gulf Visas last week, and they were reiterating, apart from the usual application form, letter from the company that's supporting you to say they're paying all your expenses, passport photographs, you do need a letter of invitation. So you do need a sponsor. You need one of your contacts, a company you're hoping to do business with or doing business with already, to send you a letter of invitation. And that's vital to enable you to get a visa. Lots of ways to get to Saudi, loads of flights. You may care to fly in via Dubai with Emirates. You may care to go via somewhere else in the Middle East. But plenty of ways to get there and plenty of places to choose from in terms of landing points. In terms of health, not generally a problem, but obviously check everything out before you go. That's a screenshot from Fit for Business showing that in light pink there, that in terms of malaria, it's low risk compared to one or two of its neighbours. Arrival experience. I mean, I've been going to Saudi for 30 years, and believe me, the arrival experience is a lot better now than it used to be. But I do think when you arrive, it can feel intimidating because you've heard all the stories and you arrive off the plane into probably quite a hot environment, into a very long queue to get through immigration, and you can't help noticing that everyone is dressed differently to you in terms of the arrival and the reception committee, because everyone's dressed in traditional Arab dress. So it does definitely feel like you're in a different country. When you get to the front of the queue, and eventually you hopefully get your passport stamped. After that, everything is plain sailing. It already came up in a conversation about women going to Saudi. I've certainly been on many trade missions where we've had women in our delegation. They've not had any problems. And quite interestingly, actually, I remember one or two women in our group getting to the front of the queue and were told by the immigration officer, you know, you don't have to wear a headscarf. So, you know, I think, you know, for the females wearing, you know, conservative dress, but, you know, they're conscious about the fact that you're coming from Western Europe. Internal travel and taxis. I was talking to Munir about this again last week. if you can get around, if your main business is in the city centre, you can get around easily by taxi, or you can get your customer or potential customer to pick you up, that's great. But if you do have to go out a long way to some of these business parks, you may have to consider whether or not you need to drive yourself. It's quite okay. I've driven myself many times in Saudi, but just be very careful, because you do get young Arabs who drive extremely quickly in top-of-the-range cars. So they're not people you want to have an accident with. The hotels are fantastic. The food in the hotels is fantastic. But do remember, Saudi Arabia is an alcohol-free, a dry state. So you might get invited to go back to expatriates' homes. You might get invited to partake of alcohol, but just remember, it is against the law in Saudi Arabia. Language and culture, again, we've heard quite a lot about this morning. What I'd say is a little bit of Arabic goes an awfully long way. I think if you can learn a few polite expressions, your Saudi hosts will be very happy with that. I'll touch on culture again in a minute. Business hours, we saw the business hours from the British Embassy. You'll often find the business you're going to see might start extremely early, you know, certainly working by 7 in the morning, but finishing for a break in the afternoon and for lunch at 12 o'clock, maybe not restarting till 3. But it might be the Saudi business is starting much later, maybe not starting till 5 and then going on till 9. So do find out what the people you want to see, what hours they're actually working. Meetings and negotiation, Mania sort of covered this really, but it's certainly not a hard sell. It's about building relationships, and anyone you meet in probably any area in the Middle East will be probably a very good negotiator and will expect to negotiate. So if you do give your first and last price first, then you might find you're in quite a difficult position. Again, Mania talked about repeat visits, and companies might send different people, but actually sending the same person, the same face in front of your customers, potential clients, is a good thing to do. They like to do business with individuals and build relationships. Just finishing off, for anyone in the Yorkshire region, we do still have some funding to fund visits, flights, hotels, going to exhibitions for Saudi or anyone else in the world for that matter, up until the 31st of May. So if you haven't been talking to us about funding, please do have a chat to us about it.
Great. Thanks for that, Simon. As you can see, we've got some details on your screen should you need to contact anybody. We are now going to begin answering questions that have been submitted during today's presentation. Just as a reminder, you can still submit your questions through the Q&A panel, which will be on the right-hand side of your screen. If we just start, I've got a question here, which is, what's the Saudi view of British businesses? So do we have any advantages or disadvantages when visiting compared to other countries?
It's Chris here. I'll have a go at that. I think there's great respect for British brands and expertise, but there is also perception that we are rather conservative and a bit slow off the mark. But that's not a bad thing, and the great advantage that we do have is that Saudis love coming to the UK. Many of our Saudi members have second homes in London, so once you get to know them, to actually be able to meet in London, invite them out of London as well. Increasingly, we've been taking delegations to different parts of the UK. I think that's you're pushing at an open door there.
I think we find as a UK business as well, British service is still revered. Organisations like to do business with British companies. I find that when we turn up, they like telling people, oh, I've got such and such an organisation from the UK that have come to meet us. And it certainly does help.
Great, thank you. We've got another question here. So, just talking about how large Saudi Arabia is. So, it's a very large country. Would you advise initially focusing on one city, or can you easily cover 2 or 3 cities in a visit?
If I could jump in here, Freddie from AEI, I think it's worth concentrating your efforts, at least to begin with, I would say, in one particular area, just given the size of the market. We would always recommend, where possible, and over time, of course, that you develop what we call a partner matrix. So a matrix, a network of partners or distributors that can cover the main urban centres of Riyadh, Dammam, and Jeddah. But of course, depending on your size, your capacity, your resources, it may well be the case that you just want to focus your attention in one place just to begin with, and then branch out from there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. So another question surrounding visas. So I know we've touched on visas very quickly, but can you just recap how would you go about getting a visa, and is there anybody else that can help with getting the visa?
So,
can I jump in from a UK perspective? Would you mind?
Feel free.
So if you look at the way that we enter Saudi, we'll always, as Simon mentioned, we'll need to go to one of our clients or an organisation we're about to do business with and ask them for a letter of invitation. We'll then use that. You need to also get a letter from your own organisation as well, explaining who you are, the reasons why you want to go to Saudi. There are numerous visa companies. Gulf Visa, that Simon mentioned before, are very good. Sufi and his guys are very good. You will have to sign up for the medical insurance, but get your own anyway. You will have to get everything stamped by the Chamber of Commerce, and then pay the fee. But generally, as long as you've got all your paperwork in order, it is quite painless. Pay your fee, you're done, and then you just make the decision whether you want a single entry visa, a multiple entry visa, 6 months, a year. There's so many different varieties, but the visa agents can advise, but also look at, are you planning to go back within the next 3 to 6 months, and then that again could make your decision.
Yeah, and Munir, if I could just add on to that, it's Freddie here again from AEI. Absolutely. The actual process of getting a visa nowadays is not a hugely complicated and long and drawn-out process. It is actually now possible to get 5-year visas for UK nationals, so that is something to bear in mind, of course, if you do plan on going back, back and forth, and of course that's what we'd recommend. Then you could well look at either a 2-year or even a 5-year visa, depending on how long you anticipate being there. And you can use a partner, a Saudi company, someone that you're working with to help get that letter of invitation, or if you'd rather do it independently and stay independent of your distributor or your customer, then that is a service that we at AEI can offer. We can help with those letters of invitation, and we can help lead you through the process of applying for the visa.
Perfect. I think that explains it a little bit more, which is great. From everything that's been said in the webinar, what should we definitely do prior to a visit?
That's a difficult one, but with Chris here, I think Munir or Freddie made the point that go with the flow. What my advice would be, try and pin down a number of fixed meetings, but don't expect commitments, 4 weeks before you go. I usually find 2 weeks before is quite a good time to make sure the person you want to visit is actually going to be in the country. Sometimes they won't give you a time straight away, and you have to actually be on the ground and pick up the telephone, and then you will get an invitation. So it's very important to leave some gaps in your program so that you can shift things around for last-minute calls once you're there. So don't send too many emails. It just doesn't work like that. But provided you've got some fixed points in the program, once you're there, you'll be able to build around it, in my experience.
Yeah, Simon here from DIT. One of the things we probably haven't discussed, but it came up on one of the questions just now, it touched upon it. I think it's deciding where you want to go. And if you are going to go to, say, 3 cities, Jeddah, Riyadh, Dammam, you don't think about driving, by the way. As we've said, it's a massive country, so you're going to be travelling on internal flights. So, book the flights to fit in with the timetable. And most of the airports are a long way out of town, particularly Dammam Airport. So you might well think, well, we'll go in. A lot of companies do via Bahrain Airport and go across the causeway. And that could be quite a convenient way to enter Saudi Arabia. Just be aware, though, if you do what everyone else is doing, you go in on a Thursday or on a Thursday, it could be extremely busy across the causeway. So it can be a very quick way of getting in and out, but it depends if you're travelling at the same time as everyone else.
I'm sorry, Chris, again, just to add, I think Simon mentioned the arrival process. Well, I've lived in Saudi 3 years, and I've been travelling back there the past 5 years. What I can say is it's vastly improved, and now it's very well organised in terms of the arrival at Riyadh Airport. My experience at the moment is not waiting more than 5 or 10 minutes, and there are basically 2 lines, one with a new visa and one with an existing visa. But they have lots of desks now, and it does move quite quickly. So big improvement there.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we've got time for one more question. So this is, are there any companies that specialise with exporting services that it's possible to partner with?
Yeah, not quite sure I understand that, but I think maybe what the question is referring to is perhaps people like AEI who can provide a service on the ground. I mean, there are a number of companies that do that sort of thing, but our experience is that AEI has a very good reach. But I think the key thing is make the connections before you go. And do talk to us, the Saudi British Business Council. We have an office in Mayfair. We're a membership organisation, but we always have time for non-members. And if you want to come and have a coffee in London before you leave, do feel free. Contact myself or Oliver, who works with me.
Yeah, thank you very much for the plug, Chris. I think if that is what the question is asking, then we at AEI are fairly well suited to supporting with that sort of thing on the ground in Saudi. So whether that is whether you're looking to do market research, or whether you're looking for visa services, life support, accommodation, transport. All that sort of thing, that's what we're there to help you with. But certainly, speaking to the likes of SBJBC, going in and talking to them, they have a wealth of knowledge, of course, and a number of them who spent many years over in Saudi Arabia. So, yeah, as he says, please talk to either of us, and we'll see how we can help. If the question is more geared towards companies to help you import, then again, yes, there are a number of companies in Saudi Arabia that specialise in that, and I can talk to anybody offline after this about any of that in more detail.
It's Simon here from DIT. I mean, it goes without saying that, whichever region you are in the UK, we've got a commercial team on the ground here, we've got international trade advisors. So we'd say, speak to your local international trade advisor, talk to them about what you want to do, when you want to do it, and the support you think you need. And we happy to help you on every stage of your development, really.
And from our perspective as a UK small business doing work in Saudi, if we can help or offer any advice as well, please get in touch.
Perfect. So I think we'll have to leave it there today. Thank you very much for joining us, and on behalf of all the team here. We will have a short feedback survey when we close down the webinar. I really appreciate it if you could fill this in. You'll receive a follow-up email as well once the webinar has been shut down. So again, thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks very much for hosting. Bye.
No problem. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.